Torn Granger checking in for the final time in regards to the issue of television and violence. Television and violence has seemingly intensified over the last 5 years, but I don't believe that it has gone any further than it has before. The violence has seemed to be more frequent as there are potentially more violent programs or programs that involve some level of violence, but I still don't believe that it's too far or has been too much for cable television. Violence and other suggestive themes are more prevalent on premium channels such as HBO, but also with the creation of Netflix. It's not only premium channels delving into violent programs, but anyone with an account can access this content. The real world is often more violent than what is allowed for cable television, so therefore, what is on television can't be worse than the real world, while at the same time, the world isn't always as scary as it may seem. In regards to The Walking Dead, the show is primarily based on the comic series. Therefore, it has an outline and is not senseless violence, as a post-apocalyptic world would be inherently violent as it is, especially when it involves zombies and is either you or them dying. Or as we have seen in real life, and it also applies to The Walking Dead, that the battle for resources and power is far often very bloody and violent. In terms of the question, does the episode go too far? As a fan of the show, I think it fits with the overall theme and how they want to portray Negan. The network knew this episode was going to happen eventually, and with the deaths already having occurred in the comic, the producers and crew had to stick with the story and make it connected. The entire situation may not take away from the highly graphic nature of the scene and entire episode, and some have deemed it incredibly violent, which it is, but the network knew it was going to happen, and I think they did the best they could with it. I would show the episode as it is, and as it did run. My position on this level of violence would be that it doesn't necessarily bother me. I wouldn't say that I'm totally desensitized to violence, or this level of violence in particular, but I still have no problem with it. As a fan of the show, I expected and knew that the moment was going to happen, and the entire intrigue of having to wait and find out the deaths was part of the allure of the show. It doesn't mean that I'm inherently more violent person than anyone else, or that I'm more aggressive than most people. I may have a higher tolerance for things like that. My only discrepancy or issue with the topic is that watching these types of programs, listening to rap or metal music, or playing violent video games makes people more inherently violent or act more aggressively towards other people, or that violence and aggression is how people who partake in these activities solve problems or erupt in a fit of rage when faced with a negative situation. In short, as a fan of the show and one who watched the episode, I'm not bothered by the violence, and I don't think that it went too far. It probably walked right up to that line and maybe slightly crossed it, but in my mind, it didn't, because I knew what to expect from the show, and that high levels of violence would occur. And as the world keeps changing, we might be able to expect more of these types of shows, or shows with an overall more violent tone, because those shows draw intrigue and viewers.